On the morning of my son's high school graduation, I stood outside Eastwood Academy in my best suit, holding the vintage camera I'd promised to use just for him. I had arrived an hour early, eager, proud, and yes, maybe a little too sentimental for a 52-year-old man with bad knees and a mortgage. But the moment my children stepped out of the car, Lucas in his cap and gown, Jessica in designer, sunglasses and Lily glued to her phone, I could feel the chill before they even spoke. "You don't need to be here, Dad," Jessica muttered under her breath, looking me over with a smirk. "This is Lucas's day, not yours." Lucas didn't even make eye contact. "You're kinda irrelevant, Dad," Lily added. Then, without warning, they walked off, posing for pictures with their mom and stepfather, while I stood in the background like a stranger. 2 hours later, they posted beach photos from the Bahamas. 1 week later, they called me in tears. "Dad, the bank is threatening foreclosure. We didn't know the mortgage had lapsed. Can you help us?" I took a breath, then said the only thing I could say. "I may be irrelevant to you, but so is your crisis to me." The morning of Lucas's graduation dawned. Clear and bright, the kind of perfect Idaho spring day that makes you believe in new beginnings. I had ironed my navy suit the night before, polished my best shoes until I could see my reflection, and even trimmed my mustache, which had grown a bit wild since retirement. The old Canon AE1 camera sat on my kitchen table, cleaned and loaded with film, a relic from a time when my children thought I hung the moon. My modest house in Oak Ridge was quiet that morning, just the ticking of the wall clock my father had left me and the occasional bark from the neighbor's retriever. I made coffee, stronger than usual. Nerves, I suppose. It's a strange thing to feel nervous about seeing your own children, but that's what happens when weekly visits turn into monthly calls, then occasional texts with thumbs-up emojis that feel like placeholders where love used to be. I arrived at Eastwood Academy an hour early. The parking lot was nearly empty, just a few teachers' cars and the maintenance crew setting up rows of white folding chairs on the football field. I nodded at the security guard who gave my old truck a once-over, probably wondering if I was in the right place among the BMWs and Audis. That would arrive later. "Graduate's father," I said, and he waved me through with a distracted smile. I chose a seat on the bleachers, program in hand, watching the preparations below. My chest swelled with a complicated pride. Lucas, my youngest, was graduating with honors. Despite everything, the divorce, the custody battles, the years of weekend parenting, he had done well. I'd worked overtime for years to make sure he could stay at Eastwood when Tina moved across town with her new husband. My phone buzzed with a text from Jessica, my oldest. "We're running late. Start without us if you need to." I texted back, "I'm already here. Saved seats. Row G." 3 dots appeared, disappeared, then reappeared. "Actually, Mom got VIP seating through Richard. We'll see you after." Richard, my ex-wife's husband, the man who never attended a single school conference, but whose name appeared on donation plaques throughout the campus. "Mr. Larkin?" I looked up to see Mrs. Hoffman, Lucas's English teacher. She had a kind face, crow's feet that deepened when she smiled. "He did it," she said, sitting beside me. "That boy of yours wrote the best analysis of Gatsby I've seen in 20 years of teaching." "He gets that from his mother," I said automatically, the old deflection still ready on my tongue. "She was always the reader." "No," Mrs. Hoffman shook her head firmly. "That empathy, seeing beneath the surface, that's not just about reading books. Someone taught him to look deeper." I felt a warmth spread through my chest, a small victory in a war long lost. By 11, the bleachers had filled. Families with balloons, grandparents with cameras, siblings in Sunday best. The day had warmed considerably, and I loosened my tie, feeling overdressed and increasingly out of place. Then I saw them. Tina arrived first, her blonde hair catching the sunlight, designer sunglasses perched on her head. Richard followed, phone to his ear as always. Then my children, Jessica, 29, successful, marketing manager at Richard's firm, Lily, 24, fresh out of college and interning at a fashion magazine, and Lucas, 18, cap and gown already on, walking slightly apart from the others. They looked like a magazine spread, color-coordinated in summer pastels, moving with the easy confidence of people who belonged exactly where they were. I stood, waving, the camera already in my hand. Tina saw me first. Her smile tightened almost imperceptibly. She whispered something to Richard, who glanced up, nodded in my direction, then returned to his call. "Dad," Jessica said when they reached me, her voice carrying that slight edge I'd grown accustomed to. "You didn't need to come so early." She looked me over, taking in the suit, the camera, the small wrapped gift poking out of my pocket. "Wouldn't miss it," I said, my voice sounding hollow even to my own ears. "I thought we could get some pictures before the ceremony." Lucas shuffled his feet, looking past me at a group of his friends gathering near the field. "Dad, I gotta go line up," he said. "They want us in alphabetical order." "Wait, just one picture," I said, raising the camera. "The three of you together." Lily sighed, pulling out her phone. "Dad, no one uses those dinosaurs anymore. I'll take pictures on my phone. The quality is way better." "This was Grandpa's camera," I explained, though they'd heard the story countless times. "I took all your baby pictures with this. First steps, first days of school." "You don't need to be here, Dad," Jessica muttered under her breath, looking me over with a smirk. "This is Lucas's day, not yours." Lucas didn't even make eye contact. "You're kinda irrelevant, Dad," Lily added, scrolling through her phone. "We've got this covered." The word hit me like a physical blow. Irrelevant. Is that what I'd become to them? The man who'd worked 60-hour weeks to keep them in their school when Tina left. Who'd taken out a second mortgage for Jessica's semester in Florence. Who'd drained his retirement account for Lily's dream college. "We should get to our seats," Tina interrupted, her voice artificially bright. Richard arranged something special. She turned to me with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "We'll catch up after the ceremony, James." Before I could respond, they walked away, a united front, posing for pictures as they went, Richard's arm around Tina's waist, the children clustering around them as if magnetized. I stood alone in the bleachers, the camera heavy in my hands, suddenly aware of the empty seats beside me. The ceremony passed in a blur. I cheered when Lucas crossed the stage, but my voice was lost in the crowd. I took photos knowing they would likely never be seen. When it ended, I made my way against the tide of families hugging and celebrating, searching for a glimpse of my son in his blue cap and gown. I found them near the parking lot, luggage already being loaded into Richard's Range Rover. "You're leaving?" I asked, confusion making my voice crack. Tina looked at least slightly apologetic. "We have a flight at 3. Richard surprised us with a graduation trip to the Bahamas. A week at his company's beach house," Lily added, her eyes bright with excitement. "Lucas gets his own room with an ocean view." I looked at my son. "I thought we were having dinner tonight. I made reservations at Giovanni's. Your favorite pasta." Lucas at least had the decency to look uncomfortable. "Sorry, Dad, I thought Mom told you." "It was last minute," Tina said quickly. "Richard only confirmed the villa yesterday. We'll bring you back a souvenir," Jessica offered, already sliding into the back seat. And just like that, they were gone. My children, my ex-wife, and the man who could give them everything I couldn't. I drove home to my empty house, where a chocolate cake sat in the refrigerator next to a bottle of sparkling cider. I had written, "Congratulations, Lucas," in blue icing that morning, my handwriting shaky but sincere. That night I sat alone on my front porch, scrolling through social media I rarely used, watching as they posted their first photos from paradise. White sand, crystal water, my children smiling, blessed, family vacation, new beginnings. I was tagged in none of them. I was irrelevant. The week after graduation passed in a slow gray haze. I went through the motions of my quiet retirement, morning coffee, newspaper, walks to the park where I sometimes played chess with other men my age. But my mind kept circling back to that word, irrelevant. How does a father become irrelevant to his own children? The question haunted me, driving me to pull out old photo albums from the hall closet late one night. Dust puffed into the air as I set them on the coffee table, the weight of years pressing down on the cardboard covers. The first album began with Tina and me on our wedding day, 27 years ago. She was radiant in a simple white dress, her hair shorter then, her smile reaching her eyes. I stood beside her, young and lean in a rented tuxedo, looking at her like she was the answer to every question I'd ever asked. We were just kids ourselves, 25 and 23, full of dreams about the house we'd buy, the family we'd raise, the life we'd build. I was a year into my HVAC apprenticeship, and Tina was finishing her business degree at Boise State. We had nothing but a one-bedroom apartment and the certainty that love would be enough. The next pages tracked our early years. moving into our first small house, Tina's pregnancy with Jessica, my promotion to full technician. Our faces in those photos looked tired but happy, the exhaustion of young parents balanced by the joy of creation. I paused at a photo of myself holding newborn Jessica, her tiny face red and wrinkled, my expression a mixture of terror and wonder. I remembered that moment with perfect clarity, the weight of her in my arms, how small her fingers were wrapped around mine, the overwhelming rush of love and responsibility. "I'll always keep you safe," I had whispered to her. "I'll always be there." The albums continued through the years. Lily's birth 3 years later, family vacations to Yellowstone and the Oregon coast, Christmas mornings with toys spread across the living room floor, pages and pages of ordinary moments that seemed extraordinary now. Jessica's first bicycle ride without training wheels, Lily's ballet recitals, the treehouse I built in the backyard of our second home. Lucas arrived when we thought our family was complete, a surprise that rearranged our lives once more. The photos showed a gap then, fewer family portraits, more individual shots of the children at school events. Tina appeared less frequently, and when she did, her smile had changed, tighter somehow, more performed than felt. I knew what was missing from these albums, the arguments that began in hushed tones after the children were asleep and gradually grew louder. The nights I spent on job sites until 9 or 10, trying to earn enough for dance lessons and soccer camps and the mortgage on a house in a good school district. The growing distance between Tina and me as she completed her MBA and took a job at Richardson Development, a commercial real estate firm run by Richard Kessler, a divorced father of one whose son attended the same private school as our daughters. There were no photos of the day Tina told me she was leaving, of course. No visual record of the moment she said she'd outgrown our life together, that she needed more than I could provide with my steady but unspectacular career. "You're a good man, James," she'd said, her voice gentle but firm. "But I want more than good. I want exceptional." The custody arrangement had been complicated. Tina initially moved to Seattle with Richard, leaving the children with me while she established her new life. For 2 years I was a single father, juggling work and homework help, and teenage emotions that seemed to shift like quicksand beneath my feet. I flipped through photos from that time: Jessica's high school graduation, Lily's Sweet 16, Lucas's middle school science fair, where his solar-powered water filter won first place. My children looked happy in these pictures, their arms around me, their smiles genuine. Then Tina and Richard returned to Boise, having decided that Seattle wasn't the right fit after all. They bought a mansion in the Highlands, and suddenly my modest 4-bedroom in Oak Ridge seemed cramped and outdated by comparison. The custody agreement was revised. Weekends became weekdays, then every other week, then flexible arrangements based on the children's activities and preferences. Translation: they stayed with me when it was convenient, which became less and less frequent, as Richard's home offered pools and game rooms and their own mother, who had transformed from career-focused and somewhat distant to lavishly maternal, armed with Richard's American Express black card. I stopped at a photo from 5 years ago, Lucas's 13th birthday. We had gone fishing at Lucky Peak Reservoir, just the two of us. He had caught a rainbow, trout nearly as long as his arm, and his face in the picture was split by a grin of pure triumph. I remembered how he had insisted on cleaning the fish himself, how proud he'd been when we cooked it for dinner that night. "This is the best birthday ever, Dad," he had said, and I had believed him. When had that boy, so eager for my approval, so grateful for my time, become the young man who couldn't meet my eyes at his own graduation? When had my presence shifted from necessary to tolerated to embarrassing? The last album was thinner than the others, covering the past 3 years. Jessica's engagement party, later broken off when her fiancé took a job in Chicago. Lily's college graduation, a Thanksgiving where Lucas looked bored, checking his phone beneath the table while I carved. The turkey. And then something odd, a photo I didn't remember taking or placing in the album. It showed a modern 2-story house with a small front yard, a for sale sign in front of it. I frowned, pulling it from the sleeve. On the back, in Jessica's handwriting, "Our future home, fingers crossed." The memory surfaced slowly. 3 years ago, Jessica and Lily had approached me about co-signing on a mortgage. They wanted to buy a house together. Jessica would live there full-time and Lily would stay there when she was in town. Lucas, still in high school, would have a room for when he needed space from Tina and Richard's rules. It's an investment, Dad, Jessica had explained. Real estate in Boise is booming. We'll build equity instead of throwing money away on rent. And we'll handle all the payments, Lily had added quickly. We just need your credit score to secure the loan. You won't have to pay a dime. I had been hesitant. My own mortgage was finally paid off after years of extra payments, and the freedom from debt had been hard-won. But they had worn me down with promises and flattery. You're the only one we can count on, Dad, Jessica had said, her hand on mine. Mom and Richard are so wrapped up in their own lives. I had signed the papers, becoming the guarantor of a $450,000 loan for a house I would never live in. At the time, it had felt like trust, like being needed again. I returned the photo to the album and closed the cover, suddenly too tired to continue this journey through the past. Outside, a summer storm was gathering, lightning flashing on the horizon, the air heavy with approaching rain. My phone, silent for days, suddenly buzzed on the coffee table. A text from Jessica. Dad, we need to talk. All of us. It's important. Can we come over tomorrow? I stared at the message for a long moment, then typed my reply. I'll be here. What else could I say? Despite everything, they were still my children. I would always answer when they called. The rain began to fall, drumming against the roof of the house where I had raised them, where I now lived alone with memories of a time when I mattered. I was about to learn just how much I still mattered, at least when there was a crisis to solve. The next morning dawned grey and humid, the aftermath of last night's storm leaving puddles in my driveway and a heaviness in the air that matched my mood. I rose earlier than usual, a lifetime habit of preparing for important conversations by ensuring everything around me was in order. I made coffee, cleaned the already tidy living room, and even set out the good mugs, the ceramic ones Jessica had given me for Christmas 3 years ago, still in pristine condition from lack of use. Small gestures of normalcy in a situation that felt anything but normal. At precisely 10 o'clock, I heard the crunch of tires on wet gravel. Through the front window, I watched as Jessica's white Audi pulled up, followed by Lily's blue Volkswagen. Lucas wasn't driving yet. Tina and Richard had promised him a car for his 19th birthday, another gift I couldn't compete with. They emerged from their vehicles slowly, none of them making eye contact with each other. Jessica in business casual, as if she might have scheduled this between meetings. Lily in designer jeans and an oversized sweater despite the summer heat. Lucas in basketball shorts and a wrinkled t-shirt, hands shoved deep in his pockets, shoulders hunched. I opened the door before they knocked. Come in, I said, stepping aside. Coffee's ready. Jessica led the way, her heels clicking sharply against the hardwood floor I'd installed myself 15 years ago. Thanks for seeing us, Dad, she said, her professional voice, the one she used for clients and networking events. They arranged themselves in my living room like strangers at a bus stop. Jessica perched on the edge of the sofa, Lily curled into the armchair, Lucas standing awkwardly by the fireplace. I poured coffee for the older two and offered Lucas orange juice, which he declined with a shake of his head. How was the Bahamas? I asked, settling into my recliner, determined to be polite despite the knot forming in my stomach. Beautiful, Lily answered automatically, then glanced at Jessica as if seeking permission to continue small talk. Jessica cleared her throat. Dad, we have a situation, and we need your help. The directness was almost a relief. I gathered as much. What's going on? Jessica placed her mug on the coffee table, folded her hands in her lap, and took a deep breath. It's about the house. Which house? I asked, though I already knew. Our house, she clarified unnecessarily. The one you co-signed for. I nodded, waiting for her to continue. We've received a notice from the bank, she said, her voice steady but her fingers fidgeting with the sleeve of her blouse. They're threatening foreclosure. The word hung in the air between us, heavy and sharp-edged. Foreclosure, I repeated. Because of missed payments. Yes, Jessica admitted. We're behind. How far behind? I asked, though part of me didn't want to know the answer. Jessica and Lily exchanged glances. Lucas studied the floor as if it contained the secrets of the universe. 8 months, Jessica finally said. The number hit me like a physical blow. 8 months. Not a missed payment or two due to oversight. 8 consecutive months of deliberate non-payment. 8 months, I echoed. And you're only telling me now because we thought we had it handled. Lily jumped in, her voice higher than usual. Richard said he would help us catch up as a graduation gift for Lucas, but then Then he and Mom separated 3 months ago, Lucas interrupted, speaking for the first time. They're getting divorced. This was news to me. Tina hadn't mentioned it during our brief interactions at school events, but then again we rarely discussed anything beyond logistics these days. I'm sorry to hear that, I said automatically, though I wasn't sure how I felt about it yet. But I don't understand what this has to do with your mortgage payments. Jessica's professional composure cracked slightly. Richard promised to help us. He said the house was a solid investment, and he would make sure we were taken care of, but now he's cutting Mom off, and us by extension. He says we're adults and need to handle our own finances. Which is rich coming from him, Lily added bitterly, considering he's the one who encouraged us to buy more house than we could afford. I took a sip of my coffee, using the moment to process what I was hearing. So, for 8 months, you've made no payments on a house that I co-signed for, potentially ruining my credit and putting my financial future at risk, because you were waiting for your stepfather to bail you out? Put so bluntly, even Jessica had the grace to look ashamed. We need $28,000 to stop the foreclosure process, she said, pulling a folder from her bag and placing it on the table between us. That would cover the back payments, late fees, and legal costs the bank has already incurred. $28,000, I repeated. The sum represented almost all of my remaining savings, money I had set aside for emergencies, and the modest retirement Tina had once mocked as unambitious. We know it's a lot, Lily said quickly, but it's an investment, really. The house has appreciated almost 15% since we bought it. Once the market stabilizes, we could sell it and pay you back with interest. I looked at each of my children in turn, Jessica with her carefully constructed professionalism, Lily with her practiced charm, Lucas with his deliberate distance. None of them had apologized. None of them had acknowledged how their actions had affected me. None of them seemed to understand the magnitude of what they were asking. And if I don't have that kind of money available? I asked quietly. Jessica had clearly anticipated this question. We've looked into options. You could take out a home equity loan, your house is paid off, and with property values what they are, you could easily secure more than enough to cover this. Or, there's your truck. It's only a few years old and you could use it as collateral for a personal loan. I see, I said, my voice sounding distant to my own ears. You've thought of everything. We're just trying to find solutions, Dad, Lily said, leaning forward. This affects all of us. Does it? I asked, something shifting inside me. How does this affect you exactly? The bank takes the house. Your credit scores take a hit. You move back with your mother or find apartments, life goes on. Dad, it's not that simple, Jessica insisted. This could ruin us financially. For years. We won't be able to get loans, rent decent places, maybe even get certain jobs. And you co-signed, your credit will be ruined too. I stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the yard where my children had once played. The swing set I'd built for Jessica was long gone, replaced by a small vegetable garden that gave me something to tend. At graduation, I said slowly, Lily said, I was irrelevant. Those were your exact words, weren't they? Behind me I heard a sharp intake of breath. Dad, come on, Jessica said. Don't be petty, it's just money. Just money, I repeated. Just $28,000 that I worked 60-hour weeks to save. Just my retirement, just my future. You always said you'd do anything for us, Lily reminded me, her voice taking on a slightly accusatory edge. I turned back to face them. Yes, I did say that, and I meant it. I have done everything for you. I took out a second mortgage so you could study in Italy, Jessica. I borrowed against my retirement for your tuition, Lily. I worked weekends and holidays to keep Lucas in a school district he didn't even want to be in. That's not fair, Lucas muttered. No, it wasn't fair, I agreed. None of it was. Fair, but I did it because I loved you and wanted you to have opportunities I never had. What I didn't sign up for was being treated like an ATM that you only visit when you need a withdrawal. That's not what this is, Jessica protested, but her eyes couldn't quite meet mine. Isn't it? I asked. When was the last time any of you called me just to talk? When was the last time you invited me to dinner or asked about my day or remembered my birthday? The silence that followed was answer enough. I remembered how they had walked away from me at the graduation, how they had flown to paradise without a backward glance, how irrelevant had rolled so easily off Lily's tongue, and in that moment, something inside me, some last, desperate need to be the father they would love, finally broke. Free. If I'm irrelevant, I said, my voice surprisingly steady, then so is your crisis. The silence that followed my words was absolute. The kind of silence that falls when something irreversible has been said, when a line has been crossed that cannot be uncrossed. Jessica recovered first, her professional mask slipping completely. You can't be serious. I'm completely serious, I replied, surprised at the calm that had settled over me. So you're just going to let us lose our house? Lily asked, her voice rising with indignation. After everything? After everything, I repeated. Yes, that's exactly what I'm going to do. Lucas finally looked up from the floor, his face unreadable. I thought family was supposed to help each other. His words should have cut deep, and perhaps tomorrow they would. But in this moment, I felt only a strange clarity, as if I were seeing my children, truly seeing them, for the first time in years. Family does help each other, I agreed. Family shows up for graduations without being embarrassed. Family remembers birthdays and returns phone calls. Family doesn't treat you like you're invisible until they need something. Jessica stood up, gathering her purse and the folder of financial documents. I can't believe you're doing this. After all your talk about always being there for us. I have always been there for you, I said quietly. I'm still here, but I won't destroy my future to enable your irresponsibility. Wow, Lily said, shaking her head. Mom was right about you. I could have asked what Tina had said. What stories? She'd told them over the years to justify her leaving, to explain away my steadfast presence, but suddenly I didn't care. The narratives they had constructed about me, boring, predictable, ultimately disposable, were theirs to keep. I think we're done here, I said, moving toward the door. You're welcome to stay for lunch if you'd like, but I won't be changing my mind. Unbelievable, Jessica muttered, stalking past me. Lily followed, shooting me a look of betrayal that would have devastated me just days ago. Lucas lingered, his hands still in his pockets. Dad, he began, then stopped, as if unsure what to say. Lucas? Nothing, he said after a moment. Just nothing. He brushed past me, shoulders still hunched, and joined his sisters on the porch. I closed the door behind them and leaned against it, listening to the murmur of their voices as they conferred in the driveway, the slam of car doors, the crunch of tires as they pulled away. Then, silence. I returned to the living room, gathered the untouched mugs, and carried them to the kitchen. The house felt different somehow, lighter, as if a fog had lifted. I had expected to feel guilty, or at least conflicted, about my decision. Instead, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years. Peace. The next morning, I woke early and drove to see Martha Whitaker, the financial advisor who had helped me manage my modest investments since Tina left. Her office was in a converted Victorian downtown, with creaking wooden floors and tall windows that let in streams of summer sunlight. James, she greeted me warmly, rising from behind her desk. What brings you in today? We're not due for our quarterly review for another month. I explained the situation, the co-signed mortgage, the missed payments, the foreclosure notice, and my children's request for financial assistance. Martha listened without interruption, her expression thoughtful. When I finished, she removed her reading glasses and set them on her desk. First, let me address the practical aspects, she said. As a co-signer, you are indeed liable for this debt if the primary borrowers default. My heart sank, despite my resolve. However, she continued, I've reviewed the original loan documents you signed. You're listed as a guarantor only, not as a financial contributor or owner. This means that while your credit will be impacted by a foreclosure, you're not legally obligated to make the payments yourself unless the bank pursues you specifically after exhausting other options. And how likely is that? I asked. Given the current value of the property and the housing market in Boise, the bank would likely recover most of their investment by selling the house. They might pursue you for any shortfall, but that would be significantly less than the full $28,000 they're demanding now. I nodded, absorbing this information. And my credit score? It will take a hit, she acknowledged, but given your otherwise excellent financial history, it would recover within a few years. And since your home and vehicle are paid off, you're not likely to need major loans in the near future. So financially, I could weather this, I said slowly. Yes, Martha confirmed. It wouldn't be painless, but it wouldn't be catastrophic either. She paused, studying me. But I suspect this isn't just about the money, is it, James? I smiled faintly. No, it's not. May I speak candidly? As someone who's known you for over a decade. Please do. Martha leaned forward, her eyes kind but direct. You've spent years sacrificing. For children who seem to take that sacrifice for granted. You've enabled behavior that has ultimately harmed them as much as it's harmed you. Sometimes the most loving thing a parent can do is allow their adult children to experience the consequences of their actions. Her words resonated with something that had been forming in my mind since the graduation, a realization that had crystallized during yesterday's confrontation. I want them to be happy, I said. I want them to succeed. But I also want them to become the kind of people who understand responsibility and gratitude. Those aren't mutually exclusive goals, Martha pointed out. In fact, the latter may be necessary for the former. I left Martha's office with a document in hand, a formal letter explaining my legal position, regarding the mortgage which she had helped me draft. It was clear but not unkind, factual without being accusatory. On my way home, I stopped at a small cafe where I sometimes had lunch. The owner, Elaine, waved me to my usual table by the window. "The usual, James?" she asked, already pouring coffee into a mug. "Please," I nodded. As she turned to go, I added, "Elaine, do you still have that dark room in your basement, the one your late husband used?" She looked surprised. "Sure do, it's gathering dust these days." "Why do you ask?" "I was thinking of getting back into photography," I said, the idea forming even as I spoke it. "It's something I loved once before life got in the way." Elaine's face brightened. "Well, you're welcome to use it whenever you like. Edward would have loved, knowing his equipment was being put to good use." "Thank you," I said, feeling something shift inside me, a door opening to a possibility I hadn't considered in years. That afternoon, I sat at my kitchen table with the letter from Martha, 3 blank cards, and a pen. On each card I wrote the same message. "You wanted me to be irrelevant. Consider your wish granted." I slipped the letter and starred into each envelope, addressed them, and walked to the mailbox at the end of my driveway. As I raised the red flag to signal outgoing mail, I felt neither triumph nor regret, only the quiet certainty that I was, at long last, choosing myself. The fallout was swift and predictable, like the first thunderclap of a storm you've seen building on the horizon for hours. Jessica called first, leaving a voicemail that vibrated with controlled fury. "I can't believe you're doing this to us. After everything we've been through as a family. This isn't like you, Dad. Call me back so we can discuss this like adults." Lily took to social media, her approach less direct but more public. Without naming me, she posted a lengthy paragraph about toxic family members who abandon you in your time of need, and how some people only know how to love conditionally. Her friends, most of whom I'd never met, filled the comments with heart emojis and declarations of support. Lucas remained silent, which somehow hurt more than the others' reactions. Tina called on day 3, her voice tight with the particular brand of disapproval she'd perfected during our marriage. "James, what are you thinking? They're your children." "Yes, they are," I agreed, standing in my kitchen, phone pressed to my ear. "And they're adults now." "Adults who made a mistake," she countered. "Everyone makes mistakes." "Yes, they do," I said. "And adults learn from those mistakes by experiencing the consequences." She sighed, the sound heavy with impatience. "This isn't about teaching them a lesson. This is about you being petty because they spent graduation with me and Richard instead of you." "Is that what they told you?" "They told me you're refusing to help because Lily called you irrelevant and hurt your feelings." I almost laughed at the simplification. "That's an interesting interpretation." "What interpretation should I have, James? Because from where I'm standing, you're punishing our children for choosing to spend time with their mother." "I'm not punishing anyone, Tina. I'm simply not bailing them out of a situation they created and concealed for 8 months. There's a difference. They're going to lose their home." "The bank's home," I corrected her. "The one they haven't been paying for." Another sigh, this one edged with frustration. "I always knew you could be stubborn, but I never thought you could be cruel." The accusation stung as she had known it would. During our marriage, my greatest fear had been that I would somehow become like my own father, a man who had ruled our home with anger and intimidation, whose love was always conditional on perfect obedience. "It's not cruel to let adults face the results of their choices," I said, as much to convince myself as her. "It is when you have the power to help and choose not to," she replied. "Richard and I are having legal issues with the separation. I can't access enough funds right now to help them." You're their only option. I'm always the only option when money is needed, I observed. Never when there's a celebration or a vacation. Oh, for God's sake, James, are you really this bitter about a graduation trip? I closed my eyes, suddenly tired of the conversation. Goodbye, Tina. I hope you and Richard work things out. I hung up before she could respond, knowing she would interpret it as rudeness rather than self-preservation. The next day, I drove to Elaine's cafe to look at the darkroom she had offered. The basement space was small but well-equipped, with an enlarger, trays for chemicals, and a clothesline for hanging prints to dry. Edward was quite serious about his hobby, Elaine explained, switching on the red safe light that cast the room in a warm glow. He used to say that in a digital world, there was something magical about watching an image appear in the developer, like a memory becoming real. I ran my hand over the enlarger, remembering the hours I'd spent in a similar room in the college, before practical concerns like mortgage payments and health insurance premiums had redirected my life. It needs a good cleaning, Elaine admitted, but everything still works. Edward was meticulous about maintenance. It's perfect, I said. I'll need to buy film and chemicals, but I still have my old cameras. Take your time getting set up, she said. The key will be behind the counter whenever you want to use it. That evening I retrieved my Canon AE1 from the closet, and a box of old negatives I'd kept through every move. I hadn't developed prints in over 20 years, but my fingers remembered the motions, loading film onto spools, measuring chemicals, timing exposures. Photography had been my first love before Tina, before parenthood, before the practicalities of supporting a family had shifted my focus from art to survival. It had been a point of contention in our marriage, my impractical hobby that took time away from overtime opportunities and networking events. The following week passed in a blur of rediscovery. I ordered chemicals and photo paper online, cleaned and tested my old equipment, and spent hours in Elaine's darkroom bringing images from my past back to life. There were landscapes from camping trips, candid portraits of friends from college, architectural studies of downtown Boise before the tech boom transformed it. And, inevitably, there were family photos. Jessica riding a bicycle for the first time, Lily in a ballet costume, Lucas holding a trophy from a science fair. I studied these images with the detachment of an archivist, rather than the emotion of a father. The children in those photographs were almost strangers to me now, preserved in silver halide like insects in amber. On my way home from the darkroom one afternoon, I stopped at a local community center, where I sometimes played chess. A flyer on the bulletin board caught my eye. Volunteer mentors needed for youth program. Without quite knowing why, I took down the contact information. 2 weeks after I had mailed my letters, the foreclosure proceedings on my children's house officially began. I learned this not from them, but from Martha, who had received notification as my financial advisor. The bank has filed the paperwork, she told me during a brief phone call. Given the current market, they'll likely move quickly to recoup their investment. Thank you for letting me know, I said. Are you all right, James? She asked, her voice softening. This can't be easy. I'm okay, I said, realizing with some surprise that it was true. Actually, I'm better than I've been in a long time. That evening, my doorbell rang just as I was finishing dinner. Through the peephole, I saw a young woman with short, dark hair standing on my porch with a hesitant expression. I opened the door, confused. Can I help you? Uncle James? She said, a tentative smile crossing her face. It's me, Rachel, Aunt Maggie's daughter. Recognition dawned slowly. Rachel was my niece, my younger sister Maggie's only child. I hadn't seen her since her high school graduation 8 years ago. She had grown into a poised young woman, though I could still see traces of the quiet girl who had once followed me around at family gatherings, asking questions about everything from car engines to cloud formations. Rachel, I said, genuine pleasure warming my voice. This is a surprise. Come in, please. She stepped inside, glancing around with curious eyes. I hope it's okay that I dropped by without calling. Mom gave me your address. Of course it's okay. How is your mother? She's good. Still teaching 4th grade in Portland, still complaining about the rain. Rachel smiled. She sends her love. I led her to the living room, offering her a seat and a drink, which she declined. I'm sorry I haven't kept in touch, she said, settling onto the sofa. Life gets busy and then years pass before you realize it. I understand completely, I assured her. What brings you to Boise? I took a job at Boise Elementary. I'm a special education teacher. Her face brightened with obvious passion. I just moved here last month, and I've been meaning to reach out. That's wonderful, I said, genuinely pleased for her. You always did have a way with children. She nodded, then hesitated, her expression growing more serious. Actually, there's another reason I wanted to see you. I saw Jessica's posts online about the house situation. My smile faded. Ah, I don't mean to intrude, she said quickly. It's just, it seemed like there was more to the story than what she was sharing. And I remembered how you were with us growing up, how you took us camping when Mum couldn't afford vacations, how you helped me buy my first car when Dad wasn't in. The picture. I was touched that she remembered those times, small gestures that had seemed natural to me. You raised those kids alone for years, Rachel continued, her voice gentle but firm. You don't owe them debt for the rest of your life. You owe yourself peace. Her words, so simple yet so profound, struck me with unexpected force. Peace. It was what I had been seeking without fully realizing it. Thank you, Rachel, I said, my voice rougher than I intended. That means a lot. She smiled, reaching over to squeeze my hand briefly. So, what's next for you, Uncle James? Mom mentioned you used to be quite the photographer. And just like that, the conversation shifted to lighter topics. My rediscovered passion for photography, her adventures in teaching, memories of family, gatherings from years past. As we talked, I felt something long dormant stirring back to life, the simple pleasure of connection without expectation, of being seen as a person rather than a resource. When Rachel left, promising to return for dinner the following week, I stood on the porch watching her drive away, a strange sense of possibility expanding in my chest. Perhaps I wasn't as irrelevant as my children believed. Perhaps there were still connections to be made, contributions to be offered, joy to be found. Perhaps this ending was also a beginning. The foreclosure process moved forward with the inexorable momentum of a freight train. By the end of August, signs appeared in front of the house my daughters had once called an investment, bank-owned, and auction. I drove past it. Once, out of curiosity rather than concern, it looked unlived in already, the lawn slightly overgrown, blinds drawn across all the windows. Jessica had moved into a downtown apartment. Lily had returned to New York, where she'd been living part-time anyway. And Lucas, according to Rachel, who had heard it from a mutual acquaintance, had moved back in with Tina. None of them had contacted me directly since our confrontation, though the passive-aggressive social media posts had continued for a while before tapering off. My birthday in late July had passed without acknowledgement from any of them. The first time in decades I hadn't received even a perfunctory card or text message. The silence should have hurt more than it did. Instead, it felt like confirmation that my decision had been the right one, painful as it was. Our relationship had been reduced to transactions long ago. I had simply been the last to recognize it. With September came a new rhythm to my days. Mornings in my garden, harvesting the last of the summer vegetables, afternoons in Elaine's darkroom, developing photographs that increasingly featured new subjects, the changing light on the foothills, elderly couples, holding hands in the park, children feeding ducks by the river, evenings volunteering at the Boise Youth Center, where I had begun mentoring teenage boys who needed male guidance. My first mentee was Aaron, a 14-year-old with a quick mind and quicker temper, whose father was serving time in the state penitentiary. "What am I supposed to call you?" he'd asked during our first meeting. Slouched in a chair, eyes wary beneath the brim of his baseball cap. "James is fine," I'd answered, "or Mr. Larkin if that's more comfortable." He'd studied me for a long moment. "You got kids?" The question had caught me off guard. "Yes," I'd said after a brief hesitation. 3 grown children. They turn out okay. I'd considered the question carefully, aware of its weight coming from a boy, whose own future balanced on a knife's edge. "They're still figuring things out," I'd finally said, "just like the rest of us." My honesty seemed to earn a measure of respect from Aaron. Over the following weeks, our conversations had deepened, moving from superficial topics to discussions about his dreams of becoming an automotive engineer, his fears about following his father's path, his frustration with a school system that had already labeled him a lost cause. "You ever feel like nobody sees you?" he asked one afternoon, as we worked on rebuilding a small engine, a project I'd suggested to channel his restless energy. "Like, they look at you, but they don't really see you." "Yes," I admitted, recognizing the feeling all too well, more often than I'd like to admit. He nodded, turning a wrench with surprising delicacy for hands so young. My mum looks at me sometimes, like she's scared of what she sees, like she's waiting for me to turn into my dad. And what do you see when you look at yourself? I asked. He shrugged, uncomfortable with the directness of the question. Dunno, just a kid, I guess. I see potential, I told him. I see someone who could build things or fix things that most people don't even understand. I see choices that are still yours to make. He ducked his head, embarrassed by the praise but clearly absorbing it like parched soil takes in rain. It was strange how easily I could say these affirming things to Aaron, words I had struggled to express to my own children, perhaps because with Aaron there was no history of disappointment. Clouding the interaction, no expectations except those we created together. In mid-September, I received an unexpected email from a local gallery owner who had seen some of my photographs displayed in Elaine's cafe. "Your work captures something essential about our changing city," she wrote. "I'd be interested in discussing a small exhibition for our Community Artists series." The invitation both thrilled and terrified me. I had never considered showing my work publicly before. Photography had always been a private passion, a way of seeing the world rather than a means of being seen. But something had shifted in me over these past months. The need for approval from my children, from Tina, from society, had loosened its grip on my choices. I found myself saying yes to the gallery owner, agreeing to select 20 prints for a November exhibition. As I sorted through potential images in the darkroom, Rachel dropped by with sandwiches from the deli down the street. "These are incredible, Uncle James," she said, examining a series of portraits I'd taken of elderly couples in the park. "You really capture the essence of people." "It's easier with strangers," I admitted. "They don't have expectations of how I should see them." Rachel studied a particular image, an older man feeding pigeons, his weathered face creased with a private smile. "I remember you taking pictures at all our family gatherings when I was little. Mom has albums full of them." "I'd forgotten about those," I said, realizing how compartmentalized my memories had become. Pre-Tina, marriage years, single, fatherhood, and now this new chapter. "You should include some in your exhibition," Rachel suggested. "The contrast between past and present would be powerful." I considered her idea, mentally reviewing the negatives I'd stored away. "Maybe," I said. "I'll think about it." As September rolled into October, the temperatures dropped, and the trees along my street turned brilliant shades of gold and crimson. I spent a weekend weatherizing my house, cleaning gutters, checking insulation, putting away garden tools for the winter. It was during this autumn ritual that I discovered the box in my attic, a plain cardboard container labeled Lucas School Projects in my handwriting. I had been looking for winter clothing to donate to the youth center, but this unexpected find drew me in like a magnet. Inside were carefully preserved mementos from Lucas's elementary and middle school years, science fair ribbons, art projects, handwritten stories. At the bottom, wrapped in tissue paper, was a clay handprint he had made in first grade, painted blue, his favorite color at the time, with "I love you, Dad" carved into the still soft clay. I sat on the attic floor, holding this artifact from a time when love had been simple and freely expressed, when Dad had been a title of honor rather than an obligatory address. Emotion rose in my throat, threatening to overflow after months of careful containment. I allowed myself to feel it fully, the grief for what had been lost, the longing for connection, the anger at being discarded, the guilt over whether I could have somehow prevented the distance that had grown between us. When the wave subsided, I rewrapped the handprint and placed it carefully in my pocket rather than back in the box. Some memories deserved to be kept close. That evening, as I sat on my porch watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and purple, a familiar blue Honda pulled into my driveway. I recognized it immediately. Lucas's car, a 16th birthday gift from Tina and Richard. My heart quickened as he emerged, taller than I remembered, shoulders broader under his grey hoodie. He stood for a moment beside his car, as if gathering courage, then walked slowly up the path to my porch. "Hey, Dad," he said, his voice deeper than it had been at graduation, his eyes meeting mine briefly before darting away. "Lucas," I said, struggling to keep my voice neutral. "This is a surprise." He nodded, shifting his weight from one foot to the other. "Can we talk?" I gestured to the empty chair beside me. "Have a seat." He settled into it awkwardly, his long legs folded uncomfortably, hands shoved into his hoodie pockets, in a gesture so familiar it made my chest ache. We sat in silence for a long moment, watching as the last light faded from the sky and the first stars appeared. "I got a job," he finally said, "at the auto parts store on Fairview, part-time while I take classes at the community college." "That's good," I said, genuinely pleased. "What are you studying?" "Business administration for now. I'm not sure yet what I want to do long-term." Another silence stretched between us, more comfortable than the first. "I owe you an apology," Lucas said, suddenly the words tumbling out as if he'd rehearsed them. "For graduation, for the Bahamas, for everything." I turned to look at him, this young man who had once been the little boy who sat on my shoulders at parades, who had called me his hero, who had slowly drifted away into a stranger. "I'm listening," I said quietly. Lucas took a deep breath, his fingers twisting the drawstrings of his hoodie, a nervous habit from childhood that he'd apparently never outgrown. "I didn't mean what I said at graduation," he began, "about you being irrelevant. I was just, I don't know, trying to fit in with Jessica and Lily. They always seemed so sure of everything, so sophisticated. I wanted to be like them." I nodded, giving him space to continue. "When Mom and Richard split up, everything changed. The money, the fancy trips, the promises, it all disappeared overnight. Richard just cut us off, said we were adults and needed to learn financial responsibility." Lucas gave a bitter laugh. "Pretty rich coming from the guy who encouraged Jessica to buy that house in the first place." "What happened with your mother and Richard?" I asked, curious despite myself. Lucas shrugged. "He cheated with his assistant. Classic, right? Mum found out when she surprised him at his office one weekend." He paused. "She's different now. Quieter. She had to get a job at a real estate office. It's the first time I've seen her work since you guys were together." I absorbed this information without comment. Tina's circumstances weren't my concern anymore, though I couldn't help feeling a twinge of sympathy for her disillusionment. "Anyway," Lucas continued, "after the house went into foreclosure, Jessica and Lily blamed each other, then Mom, then Richard. They never once took responsibility. But you know what? Neither did I." He looked up at me, his eyes clearer than I'd seen them in years. "I knew about the missed payments. I lived there too, rent-free. I could have gotten a job, helped out, but I didn't. I just assumed someone else would fix it." His honesty surprised me. "That's very self-aware, Lucas." "I've had time to think," he said. "Working retail will do that to you." A ghost of a smile crossed his face. "The thing is, Dad, when everything fell apart, I expected to feel angry at you. Everyone else was. Jessica said you were being vindictive. Lily called you toxic. Mom said you were punishing us for choosing her." "And what did you think?" I asked. "At first I didn't know what to think, but then I remembered something from when I was maybe 10 or 11. We were camping at Lucky Peak, just the two of us, and I wanted to keep fishing even though it was getting dark. You said no, it was time to head back, and I threw this epic tantrum." The tantrum. Memory returned to me. Lucas, red-faced and tearful, insisting that I was ruining everything because I wouldn't let him fish in dangerous conditions. "You didn't yell back," Lucas continued. "You just said, 'Sometimes love means saying no.' I was too young to understand it then, but I get it now." Something loosened in my chest, a knot of tension I hadn't realized I'd been carrying. "I found this today," I said, pulling the clay handprint from my pocket and placing it between us on the small table. "Do you remember making it?" Lucas picked it up carefully, turning it over in his hands. "First grade, Mrs. Peterson's class." He traced the childish lettering with his fingertip. "I remember being so proud of this, I couldn't wait for you to see it. You were so excited you couldn't keep the secret," I recalled. "You told me all about it on the drive home from school, then panicked because you thought you'd ruined the surprise." Lucas laughed, a genuine sound that transported me back to easier times. "And you pretended to be completely shocked when I gave it to you. It was one of my favorite gifts." We sat in companionable silence for a moment, the handprint between us like a bridge across the years. "I miss this," Lucas said quietly. "Just talking. No drama, no expectations, just being." "I've missed it too," I admitted. "Dad, I'm sorry. For everything. For taking you for granted. For the graduation. For not standing up for you when Jessica and Lily were being cruel." His voice caught. "I was a coward, and I hurt the one person who was always there for me. The simple sincerity of his apology touched me deeply. There was no manipulation here, no request for money or assistance hiding behind the words, just remorse and perhaps the first tentative steps toward reconciliation. "Thank you for saying that," I said. "It means a lot. I understand if you can't forgive me yet," he added. "I wouldn't blame you. I studied my youngest child, no longer a boy, but not quite a man, struggling to find his way in a world that had suddenly become more complicated than he'd been led to believe. I do forgive you, Lucas," I said. "Holding on to anger only hurts me, not the person I'm angry with. I learned that the hard way." Relief flooded his face. "Really? Really?" I hesitated, then added, "But forgiveness doesn't mean everything immediately goes back to the way it was. Trust takes time to rebuild." He nodded solemnly. "I understand. I want to earn back your trust, Dad. I want to be someone you can be proud of again. I've always been proud of you," I told him, "even when I was disappointed in your choices." Lucas glanced at his watch. "I should go. I have an early shift tomorrow." He stood, then paused awkwardly. Would it be okay if I came by again sometime? Maybe we could watch a game or something." "I'd like that," I said, rising to walk him to his car. At the bottom of the porch steps, Lucas turned and did something that caught me completely by surprise. He hugged me. It was brief and slightly awkward, but genuine. "Thanks, Dad," he mumbled against my shoulder, then quickly pulled away and headed for his car. I watched until his taillights disappeared around the corner, my emotions too complex to name. The following week brought an unexpected letter in my mailbox, a thick cream envelope with my name written in elegant cursive. Inside was an invitation to the opening of my photography exhibition at the Boise Contemporary Gallery, which I had scheduled for early November. I hadn't sent invitations yet, having only finalized the details with the gallery owner days earlier. Confused, I examined the return address, Rachel Turner, with her Portland address. I called her that evening. "Did you send me an invitation to my own exhibition?" I asked when she answered. Her laughter bubbled through the phone. "Not exactly. I designed a template and had some printed for you. Thought it might make the whole thing feel more official. Check the box on your front porch." Sure enough, when I opened my front door, a package sat waiting. Inside were 50 beautifully designed invitations for invisible visible photographs by James Larkin. "Rachel, I don't know what to say." "Just say you'll use them," she replied. "I already sent one to Mom. She's planning to drive down for the opening." The thought of my sister Maggie attending the exhibition brought a smile to my face. We had drifted apart over the years, geography and busy lives creating a distance neither of us had intended. "I've been thinking about what you said about including some older work," I told Rachel. "I found negatives from family gatherings, camping trips, moments I'd forgotten." "That sounds perfect," she said. "A retrospective of sorts. Less a looking back than a coming full circle," I replied, the idea clarifying as I spoke it aloud. "These past months have felt like reclaiming parts of myself I'd set aside for too long." "I like that," Rachel said. "Coming full circle." After we hung up, I sat at my kitchen table with the stack of invitations, considering who to send them to. Elaine, certainly. Martha. The counselors at the youth center. My few close friends. And my children? The question lingered as I addressed envelopes by hand, each name a deliberate choice, a reaching out. By the time I reached the bottom of the stack, I had made my decision. I addressed 3 final envelopes, to Jessica, Lily, and Lucas, not out of obligation or expectation, but as an open door they could choose to walk through, or pass by. The choice for once would be entirely theirs. The November evening of my exhibition opening arrived with a crisp clarity that seemed fitting, the air sharp with the promise of winter, the sky a deep indigo backdrop for the golden glow of streetlights. I arrived at the gallery an hour early, ostensibly to check the final arrangement of the photographs, but in truth to settle my nerves, before guests began arriving. The space was intimate but elegant, with track lighting illuminating the 24 black and white images I had selected after weeks of deliberation. The photographs were arranged chronologically, beginning with landscapes and portraits from my college years, moving through family moments captured during my marriage and children's early years, then jumping forward to my recent work, the elderly couples, the urban scenes, and finally, a self-portrait I had taken just weeks ago, standing in my garden with my camera visible in a mirror propped against a tree. It was the only photograph where I appeared directly, my face lined but at peace, my eyes meeting the viewers with quiet confidence. "It's a beautiful collection," said Maya Chen, the gallery owner, as she joined me in a final walkthrough. "There's a narrative arc here, loss and reclamation, finding beauty in the ordinary, seeing what others miss. That wasn't intentional," I admitted. "It just emerged. The best narratives often do," she replied with a smile. "Are you ready? People will start arriving soon." I nodded, smoothing down the lapels of my sport coat, new, purchased specifically for this occasion. "As ready as I'll ever be." The first guests arrived precisely at 7, Elaine from the cafe, accompanied by several regular customers who had watched my photographs appear on her walls over the past months. Then Martha, my financial advisor, elegant in a burgundy dress. Aaron from the youth center came with his mother, both looking slightly uncomfortable but determined to show support. By 7:30, the gallery hummed with conversation, glasses of wine in hand as people moved from image to image, sometimes stopping to ask me questions about a particular photograph. I found myself explaining techniques and sharing the stories behind certain images with a confidence that surprised me. At 7:45, Maggie arrived, her hair more silver than I remembered, but her smile unchanged. "James," she said, pulling me into a hug, "this is extraordinary. I'm so proud of you." "Thanks for coming all this way," I said, genuinely moved by her presence. "I wouldn't have missed it," she replied. "Besides, Rachel wouldn't let me hear the end of it if I didn't show up." "Is she here?" I asked, scanning the room. "Parking the car. She insisted on driving," says my depth. Perception isn't what it used to be. As if on cue, Rachel appeared at the gallery entrance, slightly breathless, her eyes bright with excitement. "Uncle James, this is amazing." She embraced me warmly, then stepped back to survey the room. "Look at all these people here to see your work." The evening continued, a blur of conversations and congratulations. Maya informed me that 3 photographs had already sold, the self-portrait and 2 of the elderly couple series. "People connect with the honesty in your images," she explained. "There's no artifice, just genuine seeing." At 9 o'clock, as the event was scheduled to wind down, I was speaking with a local arts reporter when I noticed a shift in the room's energy. Turning, I saw Lucas standing just inside the entrance, scanning the crowd nervously. Our eyes met and he offered a tentative wave. I excused myself from the reporter and made my way to him. "You came," I said, unable to keep the surprise from my voice. "I got your invitation," he replied. "Wouldn't miss it." We stood in awkward silence for a moment before he added, "I didn't know you were this good. These are incredible, Dad." "Thank you," I said, genuinely touched. "Let me show you around." As we moved through the exhibition, I explained each series, watching his face as he took in moments from his own childhood captured through my lens. A 4th of July sparkler tracing light patterns in the darkness, 3 children huddled over a board game on a rainy afternoon, a family campfire with silhouettes against a starlit sky. "I remember this," he said, stopping at a photograph of himself at 10, proudly holding up a fish nearly as long as his arm. "Lucky peak. Best birthday ever." "You said that," I recalled. "I didn't realize you meant it." "I did," he said quietly. "Those trips with just us, they meant everything to me." Before I could respond, the gallery door opened again, and Jessica stepped inside. She wore a tailored blazer over a simple black dress, her professional armor, but her expression was uncertain as she surveyed the room. Lucas spotted her first. "Jessica's here," he murmured. She approached us slowly, her composure visibly fragile. "Hi, Dad." "Lucas?" Her eyes darted around the gallery. "This is impressive. Thank you for coming," I said, keeping my tone neutral. "Lucas told me about his visit," she explained. "Said I should see for myself." She gestured vaguely at the photographs. "I had no idea you were still taking pictures." "I stopped for a long time," I told her. "I'm just getting back to it." She nodded, her gaze landing on a family portrait from Christmas 15 years earlier, all of us in matching sweaters laughing at some forgotten joke. "We were happy then, weren't we? It wasn't all bad." "No," I agreed. "It wasn't all bad." An uncomfortable silence fell, broken when Maya announced that the gallery would be closing in 15 minutes. "Dad," Jessica began, then stopped, seeming to struggle with her words. "I've been thinking about what happened. With the house, with everything. I waited, giving her space to continue. "I was wrong," she finally said. "We were all wrong. We treated you like an ATM, not a father. And when you finally said no, I blamed you instead of looking at my own choices." Her admission, so unexpected, left me momentarily speechless. "I'm not asking for money," she added quickly, "or forgiveness. Not yet. I just wanted you to know that I see it now. How we hurt you. How I hurt you. Thank you for saying that," I managed, echoing my response to Lucas's apology, but meaning it just as sincerely. Jessica nodded, relieved to have delivered her message. "I should go, early meeting tomorrow." She turned to leave, then paused. "The self-portrait. It's really powerful. You look at peace." "I'm getting there," I told her honestly. After she left, Lucas and I helped Maya and her assistant close up the gallery. Rachel and Maggie waited patiently, having agreed to join me for a late dinner to celebrate the exhibition's success. As we walked to our cars under a sky now filled with stars, Lucas hung back slightly. "Dad," he said, "there's something else I wanted to give you." He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out an envelope. "I found this while helping Mom clean out some old boxes. Thought you might want it." Inside was a photograph I didn't remember taking or ever seeing, a candid shot from Lucas's graduation. In it, I stood alone on the bleachers, the vintage camera in my hands, a smile on my face despite my solitude. Someone, Lily perhaps, or a school photographer, had captured the moment without my knowledge. "I look happy," I said, surprised. "You were," Lucas confirmed. "Even when we were being terrible, you were still there. Still proud, still Dad." The simple observation struck me with unexpected force. Even in my moments of greatest invisibility, I had been seen. Perhaps not by my children, not then, but by myself. I had remained true to who I was, to what I valued, to the love that persisted despite rejection. "Are you coming to dinner?" I asked him, tucking the photograph carefully into my pocket. "If that's okay," he said. "I'd like to hear more about your photography. Maybe even learn a little if you'd be willing to teach me." "I'd like that," I told him, meaning it completely. As we joined Rachel and Maggie, walking together toward the restaurant 2 blocks away, I felt a sense of completion that had nothing to do with forgiveness or reconciliation, though those were welcome beginnings. It had to do with recognition of my own worth, my own journey, my own visibility. I had spent decades defining myself through the eyes of others, as Tina's husband, as my children's father, as the provider whose success was measured in others' comfort and happiness. Somewhere along the way I had forgotten to see myself, but in the darkroom these past months, watching images appear in the developer bath, I had gradually reclaimed my own vision of the world and of myself within it. The man who emerged was not perfect or complete, but he was authentic, valuable, and very much present. Lily hadn't come tonight. Perhaps she never would. Jessica's gesture was tentative at best, the beginning of a long road toward genuine understanding. Lucas's presence was a gift I hadn't expected, but gratefully received. Yet even if none of them had come, even if the gallery had been empty save for Maya and myself, the exhibition would have mattered. The photographs would have spoken their truth. I would have known my own worth. As we entered the warmly lit restaurant, Maggie linked her arm through mine. "You look happy, James," she observed. "Happier than I've seen you in years." "I am," I told her, and it wasn't a platitude or a brave face. It was simply true. I had been called irrelevant, and in that painful moment, I had discovered a fundamental truth. Relevance doesn't come from being needed by others. It comes from being true to yourself, from offering your unique vision to the world without expectation or demand. In the end, that was enough. More than enough. It was everything.